Hey everybody, SPI just dropped a massive patch onto the public test server, the PTS, with big changes, especially coming to the mists. We've got new items, we've got uses for Brecilien favor, we've got more rewards in the mists, including all new mists dungeons. In this video, I'm going to be covering all of that and more. First on our list are new caches, basically mini chests found within the mists. So caches are unique personal chests that are attached to all of the little mob camp quest areas in the mists. So they're personal in the sense that every single person gets a chest attached to these mob camps, and you can only complete them after you've completed that little quest. They're basically just small treasure chests. They always have some fame books in them and then a little bit of loot in them as well. The fame book portions of these caches scales with the lethality, the tier of the mist, and the rarity of the mist you're in, but not the rarity of that cache or that chest itself. So a green cache and a tier 8 lethal mist will have the exact same as a purple cache and a tier 8 lethal mist. The loot, on the other hand, scales with all of those things, so a legendary cache will have much more loot than a green cache. One extra note for these as well is that the chest rarity is transparent. If you go into the mob camp and find the chest, it will tell you what rarity of chest or what rarity of cache, sorry, that it is, so you can decide whether to do it or not. Next on the list is what they're calling Nightfall Abbey, which is the new dungeons found within the mists. So these dungeons are a proximity-based entrance. Basically, as you explore the mists, one will open up near you. It looks like they have like a time that you have to enter them. And basically, they're just like this giant dungeon that has a bunch of really small rooms scattered out within it. Each of the rooms contains a bunch of mobs and then like 1 or 2 shrines within it. After all the mobs of that room have been killed, the shrine will become active and allow you to loot it. Now, normally that shrine will contain 1 of 3 different buffs. However, it also has a small chance to be a chest instead of one of those 3 buffs. So for those 3 buffs, we have red or rose, then we have blue or sword, and then we have white or yellow maybe, depending how you look at it, and I don't know what to call this symbol. For this yellow or white one, it is called the Justice Blessing. Now, all of these buffs activate when your health drops below 40%, and for this one, its effect is that your move speed is increased by 35%, and you get bonus damage of 7% for 5 seconds when that happens. These bonuses are increased by 2.5% for speed and 0.5% for damage for every Chivalry Blessing stack you have after the first, and I'll touch on what that Chivalry Blessing stacks are right after I go over the buffs. For the red rose buff, its effect after you drop below 40% HP is you'll heal yourself immediately for 14% of your health and then heal an additional 7% over 5 seconds. The total amount healed increases for each Chivalry Blessing stack after the first by 0.75%. Last but not least, we have the Valor Blessing, which is the blue or the sword buff. Again, activates under 40% HP and you gain 70% max health and current health. And this is increased by 5% for each Chivalry Blessing stack you have after the first. What these Chivalry Blessing stacks are is basically you cannot have multiple of these buffs active. So every time you grant a new buff, your old one will be replaced, but you'll gain a stack of Chivalry's Blessing. This can stack up to 15 times, and for each stack, you gain 2% damage and just under 2% defense versus players. So basically, the experience of these dungeons is running through them, clearing rooms, and grabbing the buffs. The more you clear, the stronger you get, and you sometimes get a random chest instead of a buff, which can be nice. Just some other notes about these dungeons. They exist within the same mist that you access them from, so once that mist starts to close, the dungeon too will start to close. Similarly, mist objectives can spawn inside these dungeons, like there was a chest that spawned inside these dungeons, and there was a coffer that spawned inside them, which I'll cover in a second, and even stuff like wisps can spawn inside them. Also, last but not least, I'm not sure how common this is, but I also found a random boss room which had this boss that was guarding a chest. I have no idea how common this is or how good these chests are going to be. I only found 1 of them out of like the 30 rooms I cleared, so they seem to be pretty rare. Also on the note, just in terms of how often you get a chest from one of these shrines versus a buff, it seems like the vast majority of time it is a shrine. I think I cleared around 30 rooms, got around 3 chests, so I would guess it's around 10% chance to get a chest from each one. Some other notes that I quickly forgot about these dungeons is that, one, the rarity of the dungeon doesn't seem to really correlate to the mist that you found it in. I found my dungeon in a tier 8 legendary mist, and it was like a tier 6 dungeon, so it doesn't seem to correlate too much, and there's a max amount of players allowed in these dungeons at a time. This max amount of players depends on whether it's a solo mist, a duo mist, and the tier. You can see the numbers in the patch notes, but it goes from around 6 people to 10 people. Next on the Mists update list is Coffers. Coffers are basically the exact same as the open world small treasures that you will see spawning in the Mist that everybody can see and has a timer till they open, except these are proximity based and they don't have a timer to open. At least I don't think they have a timer to open. They're also worth less than the other treasures, so they won't give quite as much loot as the real small treasures, but they can still probably be pretty valuable. I don't know, again, it's hard to tell because the PTS doesn't really have the loot systems like the black market set up. From my limited experience testing out the mists in the PTS here, it seems like these are very rare. I literally found more of the normal chests than I did of these coffers, so they seem to be quite rare. Along with these changes, there's also a new NPC in the Brecilien town that has the use, finally, for Brecilien favor. Now I have to be very careful about the language here because Brecilien favor is not a currency. Brecilien favor is going to work like faction standing. Faction standing doesn't really give you anything, it just allows you to buy better items or higher tier items from the faction vendors. So in the same way, Brecilien favor isn't a currency, it doesn't give you anything. The only thing it does is allow you to purchase higher tier items from this new NPC in Brecilien. The currency that you buy those items with is favor. Favor being not Brecilien favor, but the favor that you get from the Conquerors challenge, like might and stuff. I know it's kind of confusing, I wish they wouldn't have used the exact same word, but Brecilien favor just gets you higher tier items. Favor is what you actually, the currency that you buy items with. In terms of what this NPC sells, it basically just sells materials to make the new Brecilien cape, as well as the baby animals for a new mount. I'll go over the new capes in the next section, but for the mounts, since nobody's been able to tame them yet, I will just show you what the stats that they have and the abilities that the elite one has. So the normal tier 5 saddled Mystic Owl is just a really fast squishy mount. 130% move speed is quite fast, but it has the very unique passive that it actually reduces the amount of stuff you can carry, so your amount of weight you can carry goes down. The Elite Owl has very similar stats, just buffed a little bit. Same thing with the negative weight, but it has a very cool sounding ability. I wish I could show you guys, but again, no one's been able to tame it yet. It allows you to fly up in the air, becoming untargetable, unhittable, and immune to all crowd control effects for 2 seconds, and then you can recast it to glide towards the target position with a range of 16 meters and a cooldown of 30 seconds. So it sounds pretty cool, it sounds pretty strong. Again, we'll have to see how it actually is once someone gets it up and tamed and we can see what it looks like. Oh, also one more thing that you can buy from this NPC is an avatar ring for Brecilien, as well as an avatar. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to cover here is the 2 new capes that they're adding to the game. We have the Avalonian cape and the Brecilien cape. So the Brecilien cape can be bought with the stuff from the merchant that I covered in the last section, and then the Avalonian cape is bought, or the stuff to make it is bought through the energy manipulator with, again, favor, similar to how you'd buy like siphon energy and stuff right now. The Brecilien cape has the ability Fey Barrier, which activates when you cast your head slot ability. This applies a shield to you that absorbs damage for 3 seconds, as well as cleansing debuffs and granting you immunity to them while the shield is active, except for damage over time and crowd control effects, which to be honest is most of debuffs. The Avalonian cape, on the other hand, is very similar to the Thetford cape. It basically, when you perform an auto attack, 0.5 seconds after you perform that auto attack, you unleash a AoE of magic damage around you in a 6-meter radius, which also reduces the damage of enemies that are hit by 15% for 4 seconds. Just a note on the damage here, it does about 50% more damage than a Thetford cape on about a twice as long cooldown. Obviously, though, numbers are subject to change. Okay, and those are the main changes from the PTS patch notes. There is a lot coming in this patch. I didn't nearly cover all of it. The patch notes for the PTS will be in the description if you want to see all of them. There's a lot more than this, a lot more interesting things, but I wanted to make this video quick and just cover the highlights. So if you enjoyed it, do all the stuff you do to YouTube videos, and I will see you in the next one.